I've always heard of like Colorado Springs. Like, why does it come up in the news so often? Or like, why is it like what's the reasoning? I guess.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. We were supposed to be the capital of the state for many years, and then got voted on to be Denver. And Denver was smaller at the time, and I think they wanted something more central. We're a little more south, but we are commutable to Denver, so you hear that because of that. We're the next major city, but also just the outdoor living, like I said, the Olympics. We have just tons of military presence as well. So that is a huge aspect. And right now, the big hot topic is where Space Force going to land. We've been the Operation Command of Space Force. All the Air Force cadets that are at the Air Force Academy, almost all of them that graduated the past 2 years are now Space Force cadets, or I guess active, in Space Force and building that out. And so I think because of that, you're hearing a lot of that.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. All right. Interesting. Big military presence in the
Mhm.
area. Does that have effect on the like the culture of Colorado Springs?
Yes and no. So that actually only makes up probably about 20% of our population, maybe a little less, which is similar to other major military towns, across New York or Texas or wherever else, or San Diego. So it is a presence, but it's not really the culture or lifestyle. You do see it, you hear it, especially if you're down south and they're doing training. You hear the tanks firing off guns or something, but in general, the town is more just kind of a laid back culture that's more outdoorsy and community related.
So it's there, but it doesn't like dominate
You're
the
right,
whole like where
right.
it's like, oh, it's like pretty
Yeah,
much
it's not all about that, but you could feel the pride. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
I guess like what else? How else would you describe the culture of Colorado Springs?
I would describe it as young, entrepreneurial, but also and driven, but also laid back, right? I think Colorado got known, besides California, as being one of the first few states for like recreational marijuana. So you get that kind of aspect, but that's also not overpowering. It's just a part of the culture. We have the most microbreweries in America, so a lot of people like to go out and drink. There's a lot of like 5Ks and hikes and stuff where you get a free beer afterwards. So it's kind of that mix of laid back and social, but also, hey, when it's time to get to work, we're going to get to work.
Yeah, I've also heard like outdoor activities is a really big thing
Huge, huge.
for Colorado.
Yeah, yeah. We have the most, I believe, state and national parks, and city as well. Just, city parks are just like little playgrounds. But in general, like hiking trails, all that stuff. I live in a community that has 70 miles of trails, so
Wow.
it's intense. So I don't imagine I'd ever go through all those trails. But yeah, there's a lot out here.
That's cool. It sounds like you can get lost, like just going
I don't
hiking.
think so,
Or
because our city is unique. So when people think of Colorado, right, they're envisioning mountains all around them and wilderness and all this stuff. But we actually are considered high desert, similar to lots of Southern California, where there is lush plants and stuff, but there is also some desert aspects. And the mountains, as far as Colorado Springs, are always facing west. So you have a geological kind of thing to look at and know where you are, because our whole city runs north and south basically.
hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
let's tap into the weather for
Hmm.
so like you mentioned it's a very kind of similar high desert style.
Yeah.
So like yeah, walk us through that.
We don't get quite as hot as like, Vegas or Southern California, but during the summer months, July, August, we are in those 90s, sometimes the hundreds. In general, though, we stay in the 70s most of the year. The winter does get a little bit colder, but it typically stays around the 50s, so it's not unbearable. If it does drop lower, it's for a short stretch, may snow, and then usually melt the same day or the next day. So weather typically doesn't impede on anything too much. Just like everywhere, we have our freak little storms or little stretches, right? So
Hmm.
hail on the southern end of the city is a big thing. So you got to have hail insurance and stuff like that. We are known for getting some of that wild weather, but most of the time you'll get all 4 seasons in a day during the winter. During the summer, you get two or three. It's been raining in the afternoons. So, it's hot and then it cools down and then it dissipates and you have a nice, calm evening. So it's kind of a interesting mix. We have as many sunny days as California is what they like to say. So
Yes.
it's just what people don't expect.
I've heard that, but I've always like questioned. I'm like, but is the heat just not as intense
It's
when
not, it's dry heat.
when it's
Yeah.
sunny kind of thing? Like,
Yeah, so
uh,
when you're in California or I lived in the South and stuff, right? You have moisture heat, and so you basically you walk out, feels like you're gonna just start sweating for the most part. I mean, it depends where you are in California. Obviously, it's a little more vague, but we have dry heat here. So when you go outside, you do feel the sun, but it doesn't hit you as intensely as quickly. I like to relate it to Mexico City a lot because they do have the mountains, and it is very similar to that. Uh, but it's just its own little thing. It's
right.
there's nowhere else in America I've been that's been like this.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny you say Mexico City because I just recently went and the elevation
Yeah.
you can tell the air's thinner.
Yeah.
You're like, oh wow, but it doesn't feel like it because it's just
No.
the whole city's
Yeah, it's
fresh.
only if you're like going up and down flights of stairs or whatever, then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned it snows a little bit. Like
Mhm.
for I guess like in terms of all your life living in Colorado Springs, like what's the most it's snowed?
So in 97, I lived here. So I was in elementary school at that time. And we had a crazy blizzard, did shut down things for, I don't know, 3 days maybe. That was a couple feet. It was really just about the wind. We get a lot of wind out here. So there's drifts. And then, of course, nothing could operate or go around when you're that deep. So you got to wait for it to melt a little bit. More recently, it's been kind of just like 6 inches is kind of a top. And we go through waves like that about every 10 years. So we'll see.
Right. So like every decade you might get like an influx of something significant for snow
Yeah,
where you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh wow, there's more snow this year.
Right. And it has to come up through the Gulf actually, or either that or like from the southern tip of California, Mexico on up, because the mountains do block us. So what happens is as the clouds are coming over, the mountains are taking out all the moisture. And then when it gets to the other side where we are in the high desert, most of that moisture is out of the cloud. So when you hear of like, I don't know, Vail, Breckenridge, all these like resorts getting 30s, 40 inches or whatever crazy amount of snow, most of that moisture is out by the time it hits us.
The cost of living. So what
Mhm.
is the cost of living in Colorado Springs?
So yeah, as of January, so just a handful of days ago, the average sales price was 543. So it's a little bit above the national average. I think the national average is actually a little bit closer to that 300. So we're kind of in the middle of a more pricey state. The median 486, and just below that, if you're looking for kind of the bottom end for a suitable home for a family, nicer neighborhood, etc., looking at the upper threes, bottom fours. So we're kind of hovering in that mid upper fours, I guess, is a good average pulse if you're wanting to live here. But it's all about amenities, right? So if you want an HOA or want some of these other things, you're gonna pay more for that.
I guess like in terms of spots like you could live when you're coming to Colorado Springs, like
Mhm.
where are some areas you would recommend?
Yeah, so there are top award-winning communities now in our area, and I know Florida and other places of the country have had these where you kind of the whole community is on one, right? The schools are in the community, the pools, the gyms, everything is in the community. You don't ever have to leave.
All right, and if you like this video, go ahead and click the next one, and it is the full length video.